podcast. Today is January 10th, Tuesday, and I just want to quick start off today with why I am a conservative. I think it's important to look at our roots and understand what our foundation is before we even get into any of the other topics. And why not get into that today just real quick? So, just looking at some common criticisms. Being conservative means you're closed-minded. So, yeah, to the extreme, being closed-minded is a bad thing, but being somewhat closed-minded isn't necessarily a horrible thing in my mind, and here's why. Being open-minded presupposes that you are ideologically flexible. Your moral boat is permanently lost at sea, unanchored, shifted as the wind and sea pull you. Being open-minded means the social currents will take you to whatever, social catastrophe lurks downriver. And you're complicit in that journey, whether through ignorance or choice. A favorite argument of these so-called open-minded people is that closed-minded people are haters. They're filled with hate and disdain, and they're just grumpy, ornery, traditional people. By projecting negative motives on these principled people, liberals and leftists fill in the blanks with their own preconceived notions based on the caricatures of whatever group that person happens to fall into. So, as a conservative, I happen to be this way because in many ways, in all ways, I reject tyranny. But most of us are always leaning towards freedom. We realize that all forms of collectivism share one thing in common. They all lead to full-blown tyranny. Conservatives know that freedom is the polar opposite of tyranny, and we will oppose it for every generation to come until there is no more. Why do so many leftists oppose many of these freedoms, such as freedom of speech, as seen with the social justice warriors, trickling into corporate culture, the Second Amendment, obviously we all know about that, and freedom of association, as seen with the church and the gay wedding issues and all that? Why do people want to infringe on those freedoms? Well, because freedom is a natural barrier to unfettered government power. Individual freedom is the natural enemy of government power. The track record of the free enterprise system supersedes most all other arguments. It created the greatest nation that ever existed. It attracted millions to the shores of this country and pulled billions of others out of poverty worldwide. The saying, to teach a man to fish, that model works. Free enterprise is responsible for the largest decrease in human misery in the history of mankind. And we have an entire political party in America, and worldwide really, that are dedicated to opposing that. There is an undeniable link between freedom and economic well-being. It doesn't guarantee success, but it is the only option for widespread prosperity. The poorest people in America are fat as hell. That's a symptom of success, not misery. There are a million other reasons why I'm a conservative, but I just wanted to at least put a few things out there because I think it's important to build a case for why conservatism works versus just constantly saying why progressivism is a failed ideology. I mean, logic and reasoning and evidence and all those things, they don't necessarily sway people away from tyranny because they don't ever view it as tyranny at first. And I think we need to have a strong case on the conservative side to recruit people over here, especially as demographics reshape in this country. There's always going to be young, idealistic people that want a revolution and, the Bernie fans. It's called being young. I mean, are there adults who are still down that path? Of course, but it's not that hard to understand that there's going to be a ton of idealistic 18 to 22-year-olds who have yet to understand how the world works, coming straight out of the education system that pretty much forced them down that path. But I'm going to move on. So next up, I want to talk about the Freddie Gray case up there in Baltimore. I don't know who was following this, but basically the case was thrown out for all of the officers involved. The witch hunt from the attorney who was the prosecutor on that case. There's some news on that. I just want to break that here. I won't be the first to break it, but at least break it on this podcast. So the federal judge who was ruling on the lawsuit against the Baltimore State's Attorney General Marilyn Mosby, no relation to Ted Mosby. I don't believe so, but anyway, it was claimed that she was maliciously prosecuting. She was accused of defamation and invasion of privacy during that whole Freddie Gray case. So in this case, Mosby took a very proactive role in the investigation, so much so that she conducted the investigation independent of the police. So she's going to be forced to turn over documents that ordinarily would have been protected. So Mosby went on like this witch hunt, and she will not be protected by immunity. It appears, pending an appeal. So a certain phrase comes to mind from an old TV show. Lucy, you got some splaining to do. Many believe this case will reach the Supreme Court. It has such huge implications for future investigations, particularly those where a prosecutor takes a proactive role in the investigation of crimes. So, just a couple thoughts on this, a couple more. I'm in favor of justice, no matter who that benefits, on a case-by-case basis. If the police officers were at fault here, let the evidence bear that out. And let's all universally condemn that, if that's the case. If the prosecutor is guilty of malicious prosecution, defamation, and more, let the evidence bear that out. None of this would have happened if there wasn't such social pressure from the country before the facts even hit the ground. How about Ferguson, anybody? The hands up, don't shoot thing? That was completely a lie. It was determined by the DOJ, and it was a very left-leaning DOJ that determined that it was all a lie. Yet, did the media and everybody still run with that? That was basically what caused the entire Black Lives Matter movement to grow legs. And it appeared here in the Freddie Gray case as well. Another case where everything was thrown out and the prosecution is in trouble now. That's how corrupt this stuff is. People complain about, how if you're this race or you're that race in the criminal justice system, that people have it out for you. The reality is possibly, but not on a widespread systemic level. And you have prosecutors who are actually, buying into these narratives that were built on lies. I mean, it's utter nonsense. And it's sad that, Baltimore has to burn for false stories. Speaking of which, there's another race-related decision that just came through the wire. Dylan Roof, the white racist down there in Carolina who shot up a whole church full of black people, he is going to be put to death. It has just come down. He has received the death penalty. So, we can universally condemn him too. We don't need to make this a race thing. Conservatives are not married to identity politics. They would be happy to get rid of identity politics. Trust me. But there's a certain party that just won't let that happen. It happens to be the party that supported Jim Crow laws and slavery and the 13th Amendment. I don't know if you recall that amendment. It's the one where you abolish slavery. Yeah, that was 100% approval by Republicans in 1865. and the low 20, like 23% approval among Democrats. Yeah, just it's worth noting. I mean, if you don't know your history, it's worth noting that Republicans were created for the sole purpose at the time to abolish slavery, and they succeeded with the 13th Amendment and, of course, the Civil War and all that. And Democrats fought tooth and nail to try and keep slavery intact. And how funny it is that in 2016, 150 years later, they have like 95% of the same race that was enslaved, voting right down the line for them in favor of government slavery in the form of the welfare state. And, just as a whole, they just have a chokehold on that race. I don't know what it is. Not all of them, but conservatives have plenty of room over here for people of all races, and we welcome everybody. We just want everybody to snap out of it a little bit, Snap out of the race identity politics stuff, All right, so speaking of race, today is just a race-filled day. The AG nomination of Senator Sessions, he received the red carpet treatment. I mean, I wouldn't really say there's a whole lot of. Well, I'd say the carpet was red from all of the from the barrage of assaults from fellow senators who know him very well and know he's not a racist. But they have to do it because it's, that's what the party's about. So they have to call him a racist because he has an accent and all that. He's from the South. But here's the thing. So like last week, there was a sit-in in his office. People were arrested because they just have to try and go with this narrative. But like, what about the fact that this senator pretty much eradicated the KKK from his state? I mean, he went after, I forget the guy's name. He was a KKK murderer. He was a KKK member who murdered somebody, and he prosecuted him all the way to the death penalty and beyond, and made sure that the KKK was like eradicated from the state. On top of that, he desegregated several schools. But like, what does he receive for that? He continues to be called a racist because you can't shake it. It's all they have. It's the only card they have against him, and they have to use it. It's a political move. That's all it is. No one actually believes he's a racist. There's no evidence. So, how could you really say he's a racist? I mean, no matter how much evidence there is to the contrary, when you're painted as one, the left turns into pit bulls, incapable of letting go and just moving on. In fact, that applies to all of the bigot labels, like, homophobe. If you're a homophobe, and you could literally wave a rainbow flag around at your events, and you'll still be considered a homophobe by the left. And it's when you're having these, smear campaigns against decent people, that's when people start getting a little pissed off. And that's where, a lot of conservatives get this reputation of having disdain for the left. Yeah, they're tired of the race BS. They're tired of being called all this stuff and just the automatic assumption that, oh, you've got privilege and power, so this means you just are innately bad. No, we're all made in God's image, and we're all equal. If you're trying to tell people that based on their race, they're this or they're that, you're the racist. I hate to break it to you. By the way, speaking of it, there's an MTV news writer who called him out for having an Asian grandchild that they claimed he used as a pawn to show that he's not a racist. Yeah, he just went way out of his way to have an Asian kid, grandchild no less, not even in his control, that to show that he's not a racist. Maybe if you just stop calling people racist when they aren't racist, they wouldn't have to do that. Ever thought about that? The word racist and homophobe and all that stuff, it gets thrown around so casually. I mean, Hillary Clinton called literally half of the Republican Party deplorables and all of the nonsense. No amount of racists or bigots of any kind represent that number of the population. It's just not the case. It's simply untrue. It's utter propaganda. But that's what we've pretty much devolved into on politics, or in politics on both sides of the fence these days. Let's see. Parting gift. President Obama's administration just handed Iran enough uranium to make 10 simple nuclear bombs. The gift is in exchange for tons of reactor coolant from Iran, and somehow Russia factors in. I think it's actually coming from Russia, the uranium. Is anyone mildly concerned that even after we, the horrible deal, we allowed Iran to get their hands on even more uranium on top of the, $10+ billion that we already sent over there to a nation that is a massive exporter of terrorism, by the way? This deal is morally just wrong on every level. I don't know what the hell we're doing over there and why we're handing them 10 I forget how much uranium, but it's enough to make 10 simple nuclear bombs. And speaking of okay, let's move on. I mean, we're kind of in the region. In the Islam being Islam news, today there was another two of them bombings in Kabul, which it killed 38 and 72 others were wounded, making it a massive amount of damage and suffering over there in Afghanistan. And I was just over there in the very recent past, and I was in Kabul even numerous times, and I just want to remember that there are people still over there. A lot of Americans forget that. So this suicide bomber, it started with a suicide bomber, and then it was followed by a car bomb at the American University over there in Kabul. It's not the first time it's been attacked there. It won't be the last. Taliban claimed responsibility naturally. The terrorist attacks have been skyrocketing in the country. I mean, in 2011, there were only like a little over 400 terrorist attacks in Afghanistan. And that number has shot up to almost 2,000 attacks in 2015, which is, a huge increase. Let's see. More news with Islam being Islam. Turkey encourages husbands to beat their brides. So apparently Turkey hands out in certain areas of Turkey, a country that is completely Islamic. I think it's like 99%, whatever. They're handing out books to newlyweds, encouraging husbands to beat their wives if they don't beautify for them. So if they don't get all, sexy for them, they're encouraged to beat the crap out of them. And on top of this, oh, by the way, some Muslim men, they're the ones that they're encouraging to beat the crap out of these Muslim women. Muslim men in America are a victim group. Bear that in mind. Just keep that in mind while you're listening to what these men are encouraged to do. And this is in Turkey. This isn't supposed to be like one of the civilized Muslim countries. I mean, this is not Afghanistan or Syria, okay? This is Turkey. They are allowed to get married as young as 10, and the books are still handed out. Like, you could beat the crap out of a 10-year-old girl. You're encouraged to, if she doesn't sexify herself over there in Turkey in some areas. If Muslim men marrying 10-year-old girls isn't bad enough, I mean, how morally disgusting is it that they're beating their wives and even their 10-year-old wives as young as that? It's not shocking to me at all. I've been over to Afghanistan. I know what goes on there. It's not just terrorists that are screwed up in what they do. Trust me. All right, so moving on. Gonna get to the dumb leftist comment of the day. This one is anonymous. I'll leave the name as anonymous, but it's coming at you from the great Huffington Post, the always reliable. The quote is, "I wish Obama was the radical communist he is falsely accused of being," unquote. So does that give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on the other side of the fence? I understand there are radicals on the right. Don't get me wrong. I know there are racist people, but there's racist people on both sides. Anyone who thinks that there aren't is completely ignorant or naive or in the tank, whatever. But this guy actually wishes Obama was a radical communist. That is what, and I won't claim this is what all people on the left are like, but I am just saying this is who you share a political tent with. A person who wishes that the most powerful man on the planet, the President of the United States, wishes that he was not just a communist, a radical communist. So when I think of communists, I already think of people who murder millions of people. I think of the Stalins of the world. You're saying you wish our president was a radical version of that. I'm just telling you, listen to what some of the people over there on that side, on the very, very far progressive side, the people who identify as progressives or socialists or worse, listen to what they tell you, because they'll tell you what they believe. You just need to actually listen and let them, explain to you exactly what they wish America was. And I promise you, it looks nothing like it's looked for the last 200-300 years. If you took America and look at it in the rearview mirror, and you look at it over the mountain, and you look at the transformation of what they're looking to do, it wouldn't even look like the same country. It wouldn't even be America. But I wish they'd just be intellectually honest enough to admit what it is that they want to do to this country and its people. Just admit that you want to put them in chains, basically. I mean, that's what communism is. But anyway, I don't know. I just have to call this stuff out when I see it, because I think a lot of people think it's harmless. But they need to read a history book. I mean, there's some real serious threats to this nation, and they're internal. They have a vote. People worry about, they compare everything to Hitler and that. What about people that actually want to align with the ideology of the Hitlers of the world? Hitler was a radical socialist. That's where you give government power. If you don't have a ridiculous amount of government power, you can't force your will on the people. That's what's beautiful about America, is that we have things that stop people from being able to do that to us. We're able to prevent tyranny because of what our founders, put into that document we call the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They can't just suddenly tell us that we're going to have all of our freedoms taken away. Ain't happening. So on that note, I'm going to end this one, and we will be back tomorrow. Got plenty coming at you. More dumb leftist comments. I might even sneak in some of my favorite conservative comments just to balance this section or segment out. But the dumb leftist comments are always fun. So do your best to prevent America from falling into the hands of a radical communist like the Huffington Post commenter would prefer. Even one person out there counteracts that jerk at the voting booth. So keep that in mind. And as always, enjoy your freedom. This is Freedom Fix, January 10th, signing out.